You know, with an ending shot like that, I almost expected Porky Pig to come out and go, "Biddy, that's all, folks." Hello, everybody, and welcome to my review of the Season 3 finale of Star Wars The Mandalorian, this episode titled Chapter 24, The Return. So, very excited to talk about this finale with all of you, but before we get into it, I should address the elephant in the room, and that is the fact that I am currently not in my normal room, and actually am a bit more of in some serial killer lighting at the moment, and so apologies for that, but the reason is, if you missed my community post or didn't see on my Twitter feed or whatever because you're not following me 24/7, how dare you not do that? No, that's okay if you're not. But the reason that I'm currently not in my normal set is I'm actually currently in the Los Angeles area because I flew down to do some location scouting for my short film that I'm doing with the streaming service Nebula, that you may have seen announced over on my main channel that I'm producing. Well, I'm directing and I wrote it, and my producer is Dr. Aaron McDonald from the Star Trek franchise. If you know Star Trek, the sort of enemy and eternal enemy of the Star Wars franchise, the Star Trek franchise, Dr. Aaron McDonald, she's the science advisor over there on that franchise, and she's like an amazing, cool person, and she's producing my short film, so I just flew down this week and we had location scouting and setting things up. So it's been a really fun and busy week, but because of that, I am a little bit delayed on getting this review out, and I am not going back home for another day or so, and I probably wouldn't have time to like sit down and edit it because I'm already behind on work back home. So I just figured you're gonna get like a kind of chill, just me hanging out on my friend's balcony vibe for this review. So apologies on that front that you're just sort of getting this creepy little set. But anyways, I've rambled enough about my own life. Let's talk about Star Wars. I enjoyed this finale, and actually I think this might have been the strongest episode of the season, or close to. But I think that my major issue with this episode is it kind of seems to want to build off of emotional arcs that really haven't been set up this entire season. I think there's a lot of moments in this episode that I feel like would have hit a lot harder if they had been better set up and much more earned. That doesn't mean that their sort of utilization and how they're executing this episode is bad. It's just that they're building off of stuff that I think the Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and the rest of the creatives over on this show felt that they had better set up than they actually did, with this season being much more fragmented and weirdly paced than I think any Mandalorian season before it. And Mandalorian has certainly been a weirdly paced show from the beginning, but this one just even more so. And I just feel like while this finale was really, really well done, it isn't building up on enough foundation for the moments to hit as hard as I really think they could and should have, because they're really strong here. The other thing I will say about this finale, and I'll get into some specifics in a moment, is it was fairly straightforward. I was expecting a hell of a lot more twists and turns. Like, for example, and I'll start getting into spoilers here, I was very much expecting a twist of, like, who a spy was among the Mandalorians. At first, I thought it was Axe when he sort of got back onto the sort of lead carrier that the Mandalorians had, and he sort of said, "Everyone go down, get in the fighters, I'll take over the ship and deal with that." I thought, like, oh, he'll take over the ship and just shoot them all from behind. But nope, he just was like, yeah, I'll write it down, a Kool-Aid man right into Moff Gideon's base. So he was very straightforward. I also thought my prime candidate for a spy was the armorer. And apologies if you're in some helicopters. I'm in the Los Angeles area. You're just going to hear helicopters. That's kind of par for the course down here as opposed to Seattle. Ooh, loud. I can't even edit right here, so you're just going to get the full LA experience at the moment. But I was very much expecting the armorer to be the sort of big spy of this episode. But again, no, she's fairly straightforward, and you just get to see her. She's like knocking people out of the sky like Thor. It was actually really great. But that goes into the other element of this episode, beyond the straightforwardness of it. It's like just hitting all the beats, was how great the action was. Like every fight scene, from, a Din fighting the two stormtroopers in the hallway to like going through like the different shields, was all excellent done. It felt as close to like John Wick as you'll get in the Star Wars universe. The flying flying battle sequences were all really wonderful. So I enjoyed all of that stuff, and I also really enjoyed the relationship between Din and Grogu. The moments where sort of like Grogu defends Din in the opening, and Din says like, look, you're gonna have to come with me, we're gonna take on Moff Gideon, and he sort of says, yes, I'll come with you. Just adorable, so cute. And then later on when they're fighting the guards, and Din is sort of protecting Grogu, and Grogu's like shoving people out of the way, and they're just working together, was just really cool to see, and felt like a good payoff of their relationship. I think if anything this episode did pay off, it was just a great culmination of the Grogu and Din sort of parent-child relationship. And I think that when we get the moment where, you know, he accepts Din as his child, that felt like a great culmination of the entire series so far. So that honestly felt very earned, and I loved all of that. And there's also so many great, adorable little moments with Grogu throughout this episode, like when he's just jumping around on the little like rafters area, or when he falls and there's just a tiny little pipe on top of him, but that's enough to like keep him pinned down, or when he's like walking into the bar, the New Republic bar at the end, the base, and he just like, you see his little feet like sort of like weirdly like hovering like that. All adorable. The other elements of this too is Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon kind of has like a big boss energy in the sense that like he feels like a final boss in a video game. He's just sort of like declarative statements and things like that. I was kind of shocked and surprised at the reveal that the clones that we had seen were just clones of him that he had been using, sort of infusing Force elements into, because that feels like it's meant to pay off all the stuff that we had with with Grogu, going back to season 1, where he sort of like, people wanted Grogu to be able to like make clone stuff, and I'm like, oh, that was just from Moff Gideon. I thought we were going to be more directly leading into like Snoke or even possibly Palpatine, and sort of connecting those dots to the sequel trilogy. And that still may happen. This may have just been like a path, and who's to say, you know, Hux or somebody isn't going to like co-opt his technology. In fact, I'm fairly sure it will be. But I thought that the dots were going to be a little bit more explicitly connected here, rather than it just being Moff Gideon sort of having the sort of like kind of the culmination of that storyline within the Mandalorian series. And that's another thing too with this, is that this episode really felt in a strange way like a series finale. Like if you told me at the end of this episode that this was the last episode of The Mandalorian, I know they're already planning like 2 more seasons or so and leading into some movie that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are doing that was just recently announced at Star Wars Celebration this year. And if you told me that that wasn't happening and this was just going to be the final episode of The Mandalorian, I'd been like, yeah. This feels like a great combination of Din and Grogu's story. They get a little house on Navarro. Grogu's just like eating frogs and getting a little like weird circular like transition to out, which again was kind of a strange choice stylistically, but fits Star Wars weird transitions that it's always had since going all the way back to the original trilogy. George Lucas doing weird wipes and shit, especially in the prequels. And so, if you told me that this was a series finale and building off of all that, it's like Grogu and Din have like accept each other as father and son. Now they have a little house and they're just going off doing New Republic missions together, and that's all they're going to be doing. I would have been like, yeah, this feels like a good ending for them, and I wouldn't need more of the story, especially since we get the Mandalorians also unifying together, and that can sort of be its own storyline going on into another series, or have them pop up in like the Ahsoka show or whatever you want it to be. It would have felt like a good combination of that. So I'm curious to see where they're going to be going, whether the focus will shift from Din and Grogu to maybe more Bo-Katan and things going on Mandalore, and Din sort of being just more off to the side, or if in it at all. I'd be curious to see where the direction is going forward from here, because that sort of left me sort of like curious, because this really felt like a great culmination. Even getting IG-11 coming back at the end there with the Taika droid and paying that off in a kind of fun and unexpected way, sort of superficial way, but I was like, yeah, fine, cute enough. But speaking of unearned payoffs, the stuff with Moff Gideon and Bo-Katan specifically, and I was very glad that Bo-Katan got to face Moff Gideon, because I was really worried that Bo-Katan wouldn't get that chance. She'd just be fighting in the sky, because I feel like Bo-Katan's arc, even more than Din's arc, needed to have that fight with Moff Gideon. And I like that Din fought Moff Gideon and Bo fought Moff Gideon. I thought they were both really earned. I thought that those are like strong fights. But then the main payoff that I feel like they were going for was when Bo said, I don't need my trinkets, the Mandalorians work stronger together, and you have, Din, Grogu, and her all working together to defeat Moff Gideon. And that was excellent. And I am someone, and me and my little Star Trek heart, I am always here for a storyline. It's like, we are stronger together, we work together, like building cooperative communities is what allows us to beat the bad guy. It's not just all individual strength alone. Very much a theme that will always resonate with me, yeah? But for me, I don't feel like that storyline was as earned for me because I think it doesn't work on the two levels that I think they want it to work because of what they have been building up for the whole season. On one level, I feel like they want that moment to be like Mandalorians work better together to pay off the relationship between Din and Bo-Katan, where they have been so at odds with each other back in season 2 and even at the beginning of season 3 here that they didn't trust each other. And I feel like her saying we work stronger together is supposed to pay off that arc. But we've already seen them work fairly well together for pretty much the entire latter half of this season. And so it doesn't feel like that this was a moment that like really paid that relationship off, because you've already kind of see it pay off a little bit too. There was no like, there was no sense that like this was like the final moment. It's like, yeah, I need to actually work together to defeat this guy. It's like, no, they already kind of were working together fairly well, hunting down droids and such for the past half of the season. So that didn't feel like there was any disunity between them. This sort of was like the final capstone on getting rid of. And it also didn't work more on the political level of the two uniting tribes of the Mandalorians coming together, because number one, that was kind of dealt with a little bit last episode, but even more so, like, I just haven't really had a sense of, especially Bo-Katan's side of the Mandalorian tribes, but really either tribe, I haven't really gotten a huge sense of like them not being able to work together with the other tribe in some meaningful way. Again, sorry to blame the helicopter going over. You're just gonna have to deal with that. But yeah, no, it was. I wish we had like gotten to see the two sides of the Mandalorian tribes not working together in some big battle way, like maybe the battle for Navarro. Maybe they had joined together earlier in the season and they had tried to stop the pirates of Navarro, and maybe they just barely did, but they were infighting a bunch and it caused them to not really be as effective, and it almost cost like Paz Vizsla his life, like something that just showed me that there's consequences of them not working together, and this was a moment where they finally did. But we never really got a sense of like failed stakes earlier to make this sort of them coming together and having this big fight together really feel like a good payoff of the sort of unifying of the tribes. I mean, the Mandalorian's supposed to be in civil war for their entire history, and this is like the one chance of like, yeah, they're finally uniting, finally coming together, and I feel like this should have symbolized that. And I know that that's ultimately what the plot is doing, but emotionally, it just didn't feel like it had been earned the rest of the season. And it kind of goes back to my entire thoughts on the season as a whole, in that the pacing have just felt off and it's felt very disjointed. And it really felt like this season has started to come together in these last 2 or 3 episodes or so. But it took way too long to get there, and I would have much rather not have the like weird side mission stuff. Even though some of it I enjoyed. I've been hearing touch and go here and there with some of it, especially that like Jack Black and Lizzo episode. But other than that one, I've been up and down on some of the side stuff. I've been enjoying like the New Republic stuff that we get to see and all of that. But I would have much rather to have been a much stronger sort of straightforward, stay on task storyline to really earn these moments that this episode is actually solidly paying off. It's like the payoff is here, but you just didn't build to it. As opposed to like, say Star Trek Discovery or sometimes Picard, where I kind of feel the opposite problem, where like they build up really effectively for me, where I'm like, oh, I kind of really like to like see where this is headed. I'm really curious. And then the payoff is kind of like, meh. I kind of have the opposite problem here. The payoff, I'm like, this is great, but you didn't earn it. And so it kind of leaves this finale feeling a little bit lackluster as a result, which is sad because it is actually a decently strong one. If again, very straightforward, but straightforward doesn't mean bad. I enjoyed it. So I think that's my kind of thoughts overall on this episode and this season as a whole. I liked elements of it, but it never really coalesces into something, greater than the whole of its parts. The parts I really like for the most part, but they just never really coalesce in anything greater because they aren't really working together. Kind of weirdly, thematically at odds with what the season's kind of going for with the Mandalorians. That being said, though, I am curious to see where they're going from here. I'm curious to see what the Mandalorians are going to do, if this is going to be built off of in the Ahsoka series, and then even more so where they're building in the next few seasons of the Mandalorian going into that movie, because this does feel like an end. So I am very curious to see what lies ahead. So Mandalorian, it was fun. I enjoyed it. It's certainly no Andor in terms of like getting me energized about Star Wars, but it certainly didn't damper my excitement. It just sort of was like, yeah, cool, Star Wars stuff. It's fun. Yeah, that's my thoughts. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. What did you think of the season? What did you think of my serial killer lighting? I hope you all enjoyed it. And I will see you all later, my friends. I hope you all live long and prosper.